while diplomats meet for emergency talks, anti-Israel protests are once again taking place in a number of countries in Europe and further afield. Well, while the demonstrations are ostensibly about Israel, the Jewish Community Trust has reported a doubling of anti-Semitic incidents, more than half linked to the current situation. Let's talk to the editor of the Jewish news, Richard Ferrer, who joins us from central London, and Abdel Bari Atwan, the editor of the newspaper Quds, is here in the studio with me. Gentlemen, very good afternoon to you both. Richard Ferrer, if I could start with you, tell us more about these figures.
Yes, it's incredibly worrying, a doubling of anti-Semitic figures in July, 70 reported figures, as a result of what's currently taking place in Gaza. And as you've reported, this afternoon on the streets of London, tens of thousands of people under the guise of a Free Palestine rally are going to be walking through the streets of London, many of them holding banners saying Hitler was right, many of them shouting and screaming Hamas Jews to the gas. I don't doubt many of them are decent, fair-minded people, but if I was to turn up there this afternoon and announce I was Jewish, I think I'd probably end up in A&E, and that is a pogrom, not a protest.
How are these anti-Semitic incidents manifesting themselves? What's happening on the streets?
It's a pernicious sort of crawling of an uncomfortable feeling amongst the Jewish community. In the car on the way here, I was looking at some Jewish people in their Shabbat Saturday finery with their skull caps on their head, holding their prayer books. And I hold my breath for Monday morning when I get back to my desk and I find out about vicious sort of words and deeds and perhaps violent incidents that are going to unfortunately befall the Jewish community because of the conflation, because the Jewish community is being seen as somehow involved in what Israel's doing in terms of its defence against terrorism.
Are these, well, I don't doubt they're happening, are they rare incidents? Or is it something that is, you feel, affecting the whole Jewish community in this country?
Every Jew right now, I've certainly never felt more, I wouldn't say under threat because physically I don't look Jewish, but if I had Jewish traditional clothing, I was wearing a beard or wearing a skull cap, I would think twice now about walking out and expressing my identity.
Abdel Bari Atwan, we're hearing there from Richard Ferrer, the Jewish community in this country feels under threat. They feel they're being targeted because of what's happening in Israel. Do you think people who are demonstrating are confusing anti-Israel with anti-Semitism?
I believe, yeah, there are some confusion, but we have to understand that the situation in Gaza is appalling, and those people are influenced by what's happening there. The amount of destruction that Israeli inflicting on innocent people in Gaza is really devastating. 1,000 people are killed until now, and more than 5,000 people were injured. A lot of houses were demolished completely. 250 children were massacred by the Israeli bombardment. So those people are influenced, and the Israeli would like to make some sort of a one unit between the Israeli and the Jews. This is the problem. Israel is presenting itself as a Jewish state, and they are insisting that the Palestinian and the Arabs should accept it as a Jewish state, only for Jews. This is the problem. So the Israeli giving the impression that the Jews are Israelis. So it is the mistake of Israel.
Sure, but there are actually Palestinian citizens of the state of Israel. It's not just a Jewish state.
Yes.
People don't really understand that, do they?
No, they don't, because the Israeli government are insisting on the peace talks with the Palestinians that Israel should be a Jewish state, and they should recognize that. It means excluding more than the fifth of the Israeli inhabitants.
I don't think Israel's trying to exclude anyone from the country, but let's talk about what's happening here in this subject that we're talking about, the rise of anti-Semitism and the confusion that people feel. What can be done about that? Because there's people, thousands of people taking to the streets today in London protesting against what's happening in Gaza.
Yes.
Do these people feel as strongly about things that are happening in Syria, where Muslims are killing Muslims, in Iraq?
Yes.
But they don't take to the streets.
They do, and they went to the streets, and there are a lot of demonstration against the death in Syria, and there are a lot of demonstration when there was a war in Iraq.
Do you see this strength, though, this strength of feeling?
It's not the same, because it's not the same, because the Israeli is a superpower, and they are bombing Gaza every 2 years, and a lot of innocent people are killed, a lot of children are killed, and so they are moved by this. It is not anti-Semitism, it is anti-Israel, anti-the death the Israeli inflicting on people. I remind you, during 11th of September, Muslim community was subject to a lot of attacks. So we cannot say that the Israeli the Jews are targeted. If you remember, 11th of September, I was spit at. simply because I was a regular appearing in television. So it does happen when the emotion is very high. And the Israeli, look at the British media here, look at the Independent, look at Max Hastings and his criticism of Israel and its atrocities, it is crimes in Gaza. People, when they bomb a disabled house, when they actually bomb hospitals, when they kill people, when they flatten houses with its inhabitants.
If I may.
So it's unbelievable. So you expect some sort of emotions.
Okay, let Richard respond to that.
There's a transparent selective indignation in terms of protests on the street. Tragically, 1,700 people lost their lives in Syria in the last few days. Nobody goes out to march about that, because for the simple reason that Israel now, as a result of the and this is not a new thing, Jew hate is not a new thing. You can go through the history of the European Jews in the 30s to the Russia in the turn of the 19th to the 20th century. Israel was meant to be a shelter from the storm. Now it seems to be a magnet for people with their agendas, people who wish to conflate me with an Israeli. I'm sitting here listening to your fellow guest talking the same old nonsense that I've heard 1,000 times. And I am no more a representative of the Israeli government than a British Catholic is a representative of the Vatican. I'm here to talk about how British Jews today are feeling. I'm not here to defend Israel's actions. I'm not here to defend the fact that Israel is having to protect its towns and cities from genocidal psychopaths who fire 2,000 rockets. I'm not here to ask what any other democracy might do. I'm not here to have a fair and even-handed conversation about that, although I'm willing to.
Genocide? What's amazed me, actually, look, Hamas, as they consider it a terrorist organization, they are defending themselves. Listen, just 1 minute. They are only killing Israeli soldiers, and what the democratic Israeli killing innocent people in Gaza, children. That's the difference. This is the difference between the so-called terrorist organization and the so-called the most civilized country in the Middle East and the most democratic country in the Middle East. And just one point. I know there are Jewish organizations in this country who are against the Israeli atrocities in Gaza, and they are highly appreciated, and they are joining the demonstration against the Israeli atrocities now on London in front of the Israeli embassy. So there is no it is a shame. These people are very, very, very liberal.
You're an autopilot, sir. I've heard this 1,000 times, and transparently, you're proving my point. You're probably listening to me and thinking, he's a Jew, he's Israeli.
No, I didn't say that.
And also, you don't seem to see a difference between psychopathic genocidal terrorists firing rockets into towns and cities and a nation's right to self-defense. I'm happy to talk about proportionality if you wish, sir. I'm very happy to talk about Israeli proportionality and what they're doing and whether the levels of their self-defense for their citizens is right and wrong. But their inalienable right to defend their citizens is unquestionable.
But what about Gazan people? Genocide, the Israelis are executing the genocide against Gazan people. They are putting them under siege for the last 8 years. The border are sealed. Hundreds of thousands of people are homeless now because of the Israeli bombardment. They are bombed from sea, from the air, from grounds. This is the Israeli civilization you are talking about. Look, the Jews are our cousins. We lived with them for years. And, we accommodate them in our houses when they were in trouble in Palestine. And people who are demonstrating, they are not demonstrating against the Jews. As I said, there are Jewish people, honorable Jews, who are actually against the Israeli atrocities. So please, when you talk about genocide, talk about the genocide of Israel against the Palestinian people.
There are millions,
1,000 people are killed, and they were in Lebanon also killed by the Israeli. They are using their superpower to kill people, defenseless people.
So there are 1 million Arabs, Israeli Arabs, currently living in Israel who aren't uprising. There are Druze soldiers in Gaza fighting for Israel. Israel doesn't want this war. Israel didn't ask for this war. And if Israel put down its weapons, there would be no more Israel. If the Hamas put down their weapons, there would be no more war. It's as simple as that. Israel is not some demonic beast that wants to take over the Middle East. It wants to live in peace. It wants to be a sanctuary for the Jewish people, a sanctuary that's been required for 3,000 years. It's as simple as that.
Listen, Israel is occupying Arab territories. Let them end the occupation. They will live in peace. So the Palestinians signed Oslo agreement with them in order to have a state The Israel never give them a state, never honored any peace treaty.
Let's just finish on one point, which is what we started off talking about, and this is the feeling that Jewish people in this country feel that because of this conflict, they feel under threat, they feel under siege, they feel that there is anecdotally a rise in anti-Semitic incidents. How do we educate people that the two are different, that Jewish people in this country can be as appalled by what's happening in Gaza as they are?
Jewish people in this country should live in peace, without any attacks or without any discrimination. You know, we accept and we respect their rights in this field. They should not be affected by the situation in Gaza. But at the same time, the Jewish people, they should actually stay away from supporting a rogue state like Israel. They should say that we are actually for peace here, and they should condemn the death of children, like we condemn the death of children in Israel or anywhere in the world. They should actually differentiate themselves from the Israeli atrocities. They should put it clearly. Those honorable Jews who are demonstrating now in front of the Israeli embassy, they are doing this job, and we respect them. Okay. So they have to stay away from the Israeli genocide, which is practicing against the Palestinians.
It's very difficult to interrupt someone's stream of conscience, knowing full well they've said it 1,000 times. This narrative of nonsense, this equation of Israel as some sort of terrorist state, this inability, this unwillingness to put yourself in the position of a country that's had 12,000 rockets fired on its towns and cities. This inability to understand and empathise with the Israeli position is at the heart of this, and it's young men, often intoxicated by some sort of cause that they feel they can unleash on the Jewish community, that's causing me and my fellow Jews such great unease.
Okay, Richard, Ferrer, Abdel Bari Atwan, thank you.